Welcome to the Father on Purpose podcast, featuring author and ministry leader Kent Evans and business executive and military veteran Lawson Brown. This is a show for you, Dad. You want to be a godly and intentional father. Unfortunately, you've turned to these two knuckleheads for help. Let us know how that works out for you. Before we begin, remember this: you are not a father on accident. So go be a father on purpose. Please welcome your hosts, Kent and Lawson.
So Lawson, today we'd like to welcome the dads to the arena. You are in with me and with Lawson. You're in a virtual arena. And the reason we wanted to do this episode inside the arena is because we know, Dad, you are out there trying to score points. You want to put points up on the board for your family. You want to be a husband who's draining threes. You want to be a dad who has the crossover dribble and the step back, and you want to win the championship. We know that you want some mechanism to keep score as a dad and a husband. However, we also know that's really hard to do. Like, the best things that you can do as a dad probably are impossible to keep track of and keep score. But we're going to take a stab at it. So we've invited you to the arena. Lawson is going to buy all of the popcorn. I'm going to buy all of the overpriced soda products. And we hope you can pull up a chair, sit down with it. Well, you can't really pull up a chair. You fold it down. Like, you take the bottom part and fold it down. You can't move them. They're screwed into the concrete. So welcome to the arena. Today we're going to talk about scoring points as a dad. Lawson, how are you, my friend?
Yeah, good to see you here, man. This is pretty cool. Trying something different here. I like it. The arena, to me, immediately popped into my head some things that I don't think belong. And so we'll talk about, like, what does it not mean as well? Because, I went to a competitive space. I went to a, what do I got to do? How do I have to behave to score some points? And,
right.
So I think it's an interesting kind of take on how we are doing as dads, just generally speaking.
We were definitely going to give you some practical ideas that, kidding aside, we do think will help you gain ground as a dad. So today's episode will kind of bounce around maybe half a dozen ideas that are practical around how, as a dad, you can put some points up on the board. And I know that metaphor can be overused. And, one of the things that makes me think of, Lawson, is that we sure wish there were this scoreboard that said, like, dad, how many, and, like, Satan 0, or evil 0, and dad a bunch. We want to be ahead in the game, no question. We definitely want to be making progress, gaining ground, all those kind of metaphors that you can use. That's what sports makes it an easy metaphor for us to play off of. But there's also some fairly serious shortcomings to the idea of sports using as a metaphor, because, to your point, in the sports metaphor, there's winners and losers. There's somebody's got to lose. Like at the end of the movie National Treasure, when he says, Ben, somebody's got to go to jail. Somebody's got to go to jail, Ben. And so there's always somebody who has to lose in a sporting equation. But I think, as we've learned throughout our fatherhood lives, and as we learn through observing other godly dads, there's winners all around, right? When the godly dad does his thing, doesn't mean every single day he wins every single game, but it does mean over time there is this trajectory that's a healthy and positive trajectory. And the loser is not the other family. It's not the other kids. It's the losers are apathy. The losers are irresponsibility. The losers are,
that's smart.
The evil and the negative of this world. That's who we want to defeat. Those are the losers that we want to defeat out there. I'm not trying to be a better dad than Lawson Brown. I'm not trying to be, I'm not even necessarily, this may shock some of our listeners, and we're going to have all these guys stop listening to the show right this minute, but I'm not even necessarily trying to be a better dad, than I was last year. Like, that's not necessarily my metric for whether I'm making progress as a dad. My metric is, am I being faithful? Is one of the points I want to score is I want to score, the points that are the faithful points. I want to be the dad who stays in the arena, right? Who continues to slug it out. Galatians 6:9. I share that verse with probably more dads. I just shared it, golly, twice this week with some dads, and I share it all the time. And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. And so there's a sense in which, for a dad to score points, he just needs to stay on the court, right? He just needs to stay in the game and continue to play the game, and not to bench himself and sideline himself. So I like the sports metaphor. I think it's fun. We acknowledge it has some limitations, and we also acknowledge that scoring points just for the sake of scoring points can be prideful and selfish. But get us started, Lawson, on some things you want to talk about in this episode.
Yeah, and I also wonder. I mean, us guys do this all the time. You know, you're trying to get some points with our wife. You know, to redeem them later or whatever, or like at work, giving each other grief about brownie points, that sort of thing. Us guys talking points all the time, and I do think there's a way to think about, as we are in this life with our families. I almost said a game, because but it's not a game. Some serious stakes. And some people will tell us that just in general, as dads, as manly figures among the family, if you look at the scoreboard, we're behind by a lot. Like some dads, not our audience, but like society are just. It's all about demeaning the father. We've talked about it before.
Yeah.
Look at any sitcom. He's a buffoon. He's out of touch. Nobody's paying him any respect. That sort of thing. So it might feel sometimes, and we could even look at some data and see, like, there is we've talked about it before here too, that there is a bit of a deficit in American culture for strong, godly fathers. And so if we think about it from a scoreboard kind of standpoint, I think there is some work that we can do, but to get it right, like you just said, it's what let's step back. Like, what are points and who's doing the scoring? It's
well, our wives. I mean, let's just start there. Okay. They have the scorebook and the pencil, very sharp. No, just kidding. Definitely the question is who's doing the scoring. And we've talked about this before. Most guys would acknowledge, at least the guys probably listening to this show would acknowledge, that we're on our best days, we're actually playing the game for the audience of one, right? We're literally trying to be a godly dad, be a godly husband, be a godly friend, be a godly worker, for the sake of the gospel, for the sake of God who saved us. We're living out of our salvation. We're not living to earn it. We're paying back, this idea that Jesus has given us so much. How could we not serve him back? And so really, on my best days, I'm trying to, let God be the scorekeeper per se, and not my wife and not my children. Having said that, I do want, just this morning, I was in a meeting and I saw that my son had called me, and I couldn't take the call right this second. But when I got out in my car, the first thing I did was call my son back. And I didn't do that because I need to score points with him. I didn't do that. I didn't do that so I could come home and tell April, hey, I called our son today. I did that because that's my priority, right? That's the thing. Like, if I come out, I had two people to call in the car, and I picked my son, and I called him first. Right. And then that call took all the way till we started recording. So that took that time. And so I'm not doing that to give myself a pat on the back or say I earned 3 fatherhood points today. What I am saying is I want to be that kind of a dad where the priorities are lined up, where I'm not necessarily walking through every day trying to score points, but I am racking points. Like, I hope we get off that call and he's like, oh man, my dad called me right back. That was great. We got some good conversation in. I hope that's all true. But that's not the reason I do it. The reason I do it is because God's given me this family to steward, and I want to steward the family well. So I look at him not as some scorekeeper, like he's got a yellow flag, and I'm getting a unsportsmanlike conduct, even though I've gotten a lot of those as a dad. I have made a lot of flagrant fouls, let me tell you. And so in that light, I don't look at him as this big judge in the sky, and I got to earn it. But I do look at it like, hey man, I want to do the things that are positive and are fruitful. And so we just thought we'd have a little fun with the metaphor today, but we've got a handful of ways, Lawson, that are that are easy ways. It's kind of like we're recording this particular episode during the time of year when the NBA playoffs are happening, and I've been watching some of the games. And every now and then, you'll see a guy who's 6'10" get the ball under the basket, and there's nobody else, and he dunks it, right? And they say, "That's an easy basket. It's an easy basket." Then every now and then, there's a guy doing the fadeaway, fall back,
right.
One-armed. He's getting fouled, and you go, "Wow, how'd he make that?" And so, what I want to do as a dad, and what I'd love to do on today's show is let's give dads, the dad listening, some easy baskets. These are the dish in the lane. We picked off his defender, and he can just roll up and lay it in. And I would like to start with one that I think is one of the easiest ways for us to score points as a dad. I sat down recently with Chris Harper. He's the executive director of Better Man Ministries. And I asked him a question about the state of manhood today. And his answer was both depressing and a bit hilarious. Check this out.
Yeah, it's a dumpster fire. That's what I would say the state of manhood is today. It's not just shaky. It's an absolute dumpster fire. The only categories that men are excelling in are terrible categories like incarceration, suicide rates, depression rates, not attending church, things of that nature. Women are far and ahead excelling beyond men, whether it's graduation rates, college admittance rates, professional degrees, church attendance, spiritual growth. I mean, women are dominating, and it shouldn't be like that. So what's happened to men, in the 90s, we talked a lot about passivity, like men would just be passive. And I still think that's true. Like we wrestle with passivity, but the reality is men are slow quitting their masculinity today. They're just kind of devolving into the background and becoming non-existent. And it's a serious problem that is affecting every facet of our society.
Better Man is one of our ministry partners. We love what Chris and his team there are doing. If you or your church is looking for a group study for your men to go through that covers the essentials of biblical manhood and helps men have a clear vision of how they can be as a man, they can gain confidence, become the man they want to be, improve relationships, and create a more purposeful life, check out the resources from our friends Better Man. You can find those at betterman.com. That's betterman.com. Ask good questions and then actually listen to the answers. It's kind of like the pick and roll, right? The easiest way to get open underneath is set the pick, roll off, take the pass, you're open, right? That's classic high school basketball 101. The pick and roll. Number one, ask the question. That's the pick. The roll, actually listen to the answer. Actually listen to the answer. So I'll give you an example. Today I was talking with one of my boys, and he has an opportunity coming up in about a week that I don't want to say he's nervous about, but it's a big opportunity. It's a good opportunity. And he was talking about being a little nervous for it. And I said, do you want it? Like, is it something that you really hope happens? And then I just listened to him as he answered, and I could play back to you a fair amount of what he said, right? Because I really did want to know the answer to the question. I wasn't just asking for fun. I wanted to know the answer. And he told me, oh yeah, it would mean this and it would mean that, but it's okay if I don't, because it's a good step either way. And so it was fun to talk with him. And I just see so many dads. Man, I met with a dad this week for coffee, and he's really wrestling with walking through life with his teenage daughter. And I was asking him questions about whether he asks questions, because man, for teenage kids, the fastest way to drain the metaphor, golly. Okay. Now I'm getting all amped up about this, Lawson. Cause right. The metaphor, the word picture that I used as he and I were talking is I said, hey, let's say your daughter has two buckets in front of her. One bucket says affirmation. The other bucket says criticism. Which of those two buckets for her, if she were sitting here, would she say is more full? And he goes, wow. She would say the affirmation bucket is completely empty and that the criticism bucket is overflowing. Right? And I was like, okay, we're honest. And I said, why? And he goes, man, that's hard to say, but probably because we've been on her a lot lately for some of her behavioral choices. And then she had made a good one recently, right? A good one, semi good one, a decent one. And I said, hey, here's a free one. Like, this is a layup. It's a layup. Because you've talked to her, you can just affirm her for having done that one thing, right? So let's say you have a kid who's done 10 things wrong this week, but he did one thing right. You're probably going to get more mileage out of pointing out the one thing he did right. And then maybe some of the other 9 things you got to actually address. If you set the house on fire, you got to take away the matches. Like, there's things that happen. But if he did put the fire out after he set it, at least you can say, hey man, after you set that fire, boy, good hustle on the fire extinguisher. Like, there's got to be a way. And so for me, it comes from a heart of, are we listening? Are we asking questions? Because if all we're doing is giving commands and telling them what to do, they're going to hear that as constant criticism. Mm-hmm. They're just going to hear it as criticism, even though we're giving them guidance and direction and helpful wisdom. They might hear it as criticism. So Dad, a free layup, man. This is like underneath the lane, lay the ball up. No one's guarding you. It's the easiest basket ever. Ask your child some questions and actually listen to their answers. It's a layup.
That's a good one. I love it. And you know what? As a dad, I want to fulfill the call. God's given us a command, and He's given us a charge within our family. And so I want to generate points, but I want to generate points in the form of, I'd say, relational depth, godly discernment, guardianship against the efforts of the world. One way to do that is to spend time dedicated to your child, or time dedicated to your wife. And I'm talking about, it's the only thing that you're doing. Leave your phone, go on a walk, stop whatever the hobby is, fill in the gap with whatever it is that takes some of your time sometimes, and do only what they want to do with selfless kind of motive. I was just earlier this week, I was in New York and New Jersey on a business trip, and ran into one of our guys at a facility in Westville, New Jersey, Tyreek. And this guy helps run one of our warehouse operations, and he was wearing a T-shirt that said "Father" down the front of it, like vertically. And so I don't remember what they were. What I remember is the each letter F, was something, A, T, H was happy, and this guy was just walking around in a tough environment, keeping the product flowing, and it's a lot of long hours. We're super busy up there right now, and so I see that T-shirt and I go chit chat it up, and we come to talking about our kids, of course. And he mentioned that his daughter was in lacrosse, just started lacrosse, and if you've never been on the sidelines of an actual like lacrosse game, I have not. It is crazy, dude. They've got these sticks and these balls are just hard as a rock and it's flying. I can't believe people don't just lose an eye and a tooth and break their shins. I mean, they are whacking each other. And so I kind of like grimace, like, she's doing lacrosse. He goes, well, hang on, she's little. The ball never leaves the ground. So they just run around. Oh, that's circles. Hilarious. It's hilarious. That's hilarious. We got a laugh out of it. And he was like, and the reason we kind of went down this trail together was, he said basically, they don't really do anything. They're too young to be accomplishing anything. So it's cute, but 2 hours in, it is just boring, but he's there for her. And so we went on, and I told him that about the stat that I think you were the one who said it's something like, and I don't think this is exact, but something like 80% of our time, 80% of our hours are spent with our children before they turn 16 years old. And so, and he knew that. I mentioned that to him, and
he's wearing a father's shirt, so he's probably more dialed in.
Yeah, that's right. More dialed in than me.
He's done his homework, man.
Back then, that's for sure. And so Tyreek is doing it right, dude. And he was like, I am 100% in with her when she's on that field.
Wow.
Because every time she looks over at me, I want her to see me watching. I want her to see me rooting her on. And I thought that is, you're building, like I just said, that you're building relational depth. You're investing in a relationship with his daughter. And that's going to pay off down the road when something happens beyond just a nothing going on, out there having fun, knocking a ball around. And so congrats, hats off to Tyreek for doing it right. And I thought about him, not only is it I knew this points thing was coming up with us in the arena. And I thought about him and watching him day after day, standing on the sidelines where he doesn't want to be, scoring points with his little girl.
Man, way to go, Tyreek. And it's a sports metaphor. So thank you, Lawson, for bringing a story that ties so tightly into the theme of today's episode. So there's a couple ways: ask questions, spend time. Here's another way, Dad, that is maybe won't seem like it's actually kid related. However, you get some massive points with your family when you spend time with other godly dads. I have just this morning, I was telling you, Lawson and Hunter, our magician behind the curtain producing today's episode, that I spent 2 hours today with a guy named John. And John is a mentor. It's not like we meet every Friday, but every time I'm around this guy, I try to get around him as frequently as I can. And when I'm around him, I become better. Like if you could have a dial of how effective Kent is as a human, forget dad or husband, but just me as a human, every time I'm around John, that dial turns at least a little. And today was no exception. He was asking a question and he said something about our ministry. And he said, man, the main thing you got to keep your eye on is ROKT. And I said, all right, well, what's that mean? And he said, return on Kent's time. And then we had this whole conversation about where I'm investing my time. And am I investing my time in the areas in our ministry that have the highest ROKT? And it was just brilliant. Like, it's just that kind of stuff. It's like, I feel like it's like protein. Every time I'm around him, it's like eating straight protein. And there's no fat, there's no waste, there's no sugar. It's all good for me, healthy protein. And so I want to encourage guys, dad, if you're out there and you're isolated, you don't have other dads running alongside you, an easy way for you to score some points is for you to go hang out with another godly dad. And you don't even have to have a deep agenda. What I tell John is I tell him, anytime we meet, I'm going to bring you my problem du jour. And that's what I do. I'm driving out to his farm, 20, 30 minutes. And as I'm driving, I'm thinking, okay, what's my big issue this week or this month?
That's hilarious. He must be like, oh boy, here he comes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The door was locked today. I had to smash in the window. Gee, maybe he didn't want me to. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, his lights are off.
Yeah, I tell him. Exactly. And he's like, oh, you found me. Why was he hiding under the table? That's so odd. No, but like, he's so great because I tell him, I go, I'm just going to bring my problem du jour and whatever it is. And he always helps me like think through it a different way. He helps me see a different angle. He helps me consider a different way of solving the issue. And I'll come out with the problem and 2 ideas for a solution. For I got 5 other ideas that are better than my 2. Like the whole idea of like Proverbs 27:17, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another.
Right.
You want to score some easy points? Go get around other godly dads. And by the way, dad, if you're listening, your wife loves it when you do this because she sees all these ways you should probably improve, but has tried to tell you for 27 years and you weren't listening great. And that other guy will say it in the way you hear it. And you actually score points with your wife when you hang out with godly guys.
Yeah.
So just a little secret
how many times
in case you're
like, listening. Oh, really? Did that just occur to you? Like she's probably told me how many times. And now you hear it in a different way. The other thing on that too is like, we're in this thing together. Us dads, like we are teammates. And when someone else on the team scores a point, let's recognize it, call them out on it, like high five over it, because dude, this is hard. This is not easy stuff being a dad. And so anytime you're around another good guy that is also trying to score points as a dad and sees you do a layup and he's going to see that and come pat you on the back. And I think you do the same thing. And one more, talking about wives, is to love your wife in front of your children and even like let them know that it's the love you have for your wife is, I'm going to use air quotes, but it's more than you do your kids. There's
Let me help you understand this, son.
Right. She comes first. Can't tell you. I mean, I'm serious about that. Like, there's a way to do it, but they need to know. It helps them feel secure when they know and they see the love that you have for your wife and the amount of respect that you pay your wife and the things that you just will not tolerate or put up with from your kids that is directed at your wife. If you've got an opportunity, and this is kind of where I think, depending on the age, the point scoring can be and feel vivid for your children, which is you go to them and go, you do not talk to her like that. And now you insert yourself into whatever the scenario is, and make sure that they understand they can behave in certain ways, but there is a line that is not crossable, and that line is respect and love for your mother, because they know that you hold her in that such esteem, and it's a sacred love, it's a sacred bond that you have for your wife that you don't have for anyone else in the world, including your children.
Yeah. I remember one of my boys, when he was, I don't know, 9 or 10, he kind of pondered for a second. He goes, "Dad, you love mom more than you love us, don't you?" I said, "Really? As a matter of fact, yes." "Oh yeah." And I said, "As a matter of fact, I do. Any other questions?" And we had a good laugh about it. And of course, we all know there's a little tongue in cheek there, where I love them all, I die for all of them. Like there's some level set in terms of love, but still, there's this unique bond. And it's, what's amazing is, it is the picture. It's the closest picture on earth to the gospel,
right,
of anything that God put down here. Marriage is the closest picture. Jesus was called the bridegroom. We are the bride. He is our husband. Like there's this, the church is the bride, and the closest picture this world gets to the gospel is a marriage where there's mutual submission and mutual sacrifice and deep love and commitment and faithfulness. And like we had a couple weeks ago on the show, we had, well, by the time this airs, it'll have probably been a month or so, but we had recently, not long ago, Chip Ingram on the show, and he was talking about that idea we all know, but more is caught than taught. And you're teaching your kids more about how to be a godly husband by just being one than any kind of sermon or Bible study or weekend retreat or cup of coffee or 3-hour instruction. You be a godly husband who loves your wife deeply, and watch your kids pick that up throughout their, for the most part. It's not a vending machine, but for the most part, they'll pick that up, because as Chip said, more is caught than taught. What's one more way, Lawson, that we can score some easy points?
Well, let's talk about praying with your kids, praying with your wife, praying not just on Easter Sunday necessarily, around the table, but in the midst of things. I think there have been some times where life hits hard, and you don't know exactly what to say or how to handle some situation, and so when your child knows how much you are grounded and rooted in a conversation with God, they see it most clearly when you pause right there and then and say, "Hey, hold my hand. Let's pray about this." And God will give you the words, and then there is a sense of like peace and protection that falls upon you both, you and your son, you and your wife, you and your daughter. In that moment, I think a father praying for his child is a very special instance, and I'm not trying to demean the habit that that many people have of, you sit down at the dinner table and say the blessing, but I'm saying, I think there's I don't know if I'm not saying this right, and feel free to expand on it, but when your daughter is in tears over something that just happened, or your son, something, I don't know, they get bullied, or they don't do well at something in class and they feel dumb, and they come and get in the car, or you meet them and right after they've left their group of friends at the movie theater, whatever it may be, and something is up, rather than just giving them your own your own dad advice, just reach over and put your hand on his shoulder, or reach over and hold her hand. And it doesn't have to be a long, eloquent prayer, but pray with your kids in those moments, and God will, those points are redeemed in the moment. You know, they are
immediate, you know what cash value. Yeah. Absolutely. You know, it's funny, even this week, I remember I was with my 8-year-old son, and he had a rough day at school, and a lot of people had kind of picked on him a little bit. And I didn't do what you said. I need to get a double back, because I didn't take up the prayer idea, and I really should have. It was great. Like I tried to comfort him, but at the same time, probably praying would have been a more advanced and better way to do it than just, me just doing what I did do, which was, tell him to go and, somehow take all of their stuff and put it in a dirty, muddy pond. No, I didn't say that. I'm just kidding. I did not do that. But I really look back, think, man, yeah, if I'd have prayed with him for 30 seconds, I think that'd have gone farther than even the counsel and the encouragement I gave him. That's a great suggestion. What do you think about what I said
with like in those moments that a dad praying for their child is I think it's a special, not anointment is too strong of a word, and it sounds kind of, I don't know, churchy or whatever, but what do you think about what I'm saying with?
I think it's totally off topic and insane, and Hunter should cut it from the podcast. So Hunter, go back about 4 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. Man, there's so much depth to what you're saying. And there's so much validity and power in that. The guy I mentioned earlier who was kind of wrestling with his teenage daughter, we were meeting, and he said, I want to be really proactive and active, and he had the right spirit, like he had the right attitude. I was super fired up because he was like, I don't want to just sit back and let this happen to me. I want to dive in there and get active. And I said something, and then I went back and Googled it, and I think it was Randy Alcorn, who was the first guy I ever heard say this, because it wasn't an original thought from Kent, but it was, prayer is never passive. Prayer is never passive, because he was kind of wrestling with, what do I do with this thing? And do I take the tech away? And do I make sure she can't see that guy? And, there's all this activity that he needed to do. It was legit, relevant, important steps he needed to physically take. However, he was kind of like not diminishing, but we got to the point where we were like, hey man, prayer is never passive. If we're praying for our children, man, there's a spiritual force that we're unleashing. I think Randy went on to say it's not the thing that, it's not like the last resort, or it's not the least we can do, it's the most we can do, or something like that. But he has this famous quote, you can Google it, but it was like really good, that prayer is not passive. And I think to your point, the other thing, I'll tell you why I think more guys don't do the prayer, is because we want to be seen as the hero, right? I wanted to tell my son, let me tell you how to get over a rough day. And I'm the answer. Like, I'll tell you the answer because I've got the answer, because I'm such a smart dad. And I didn't give him a bad answer. It wasn't like I gave him a snake and he wanted a loaf of bread like scripture says. But at the same time, I want to be able to say, hey, you know who has all the answers? God has all the answers. My answers are going to be a little informed by, my desire to protect you and my own ignorance and my own, you're my favorite kid, and all that. And I'll have some of that all stirred in with my answers, but that's not stirred into God's answers. God's answers are pure. And I think sometimes we skip over the prayer part because we don't think it's active. We think prayer is passive, and it reminds us we're calling on God for the answer, not us. And sometimes it's a blow to our ego, even though we might not say it out loud.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. We're talking about points, and I want to reference something that we hit on prior to today, and that is kind of like the why. Why do we want? Why are we thinking about points, and what are they for? And to me, if I'm curious if this resonates, it's just helpful. It's helpful to me to think in the terms that I'm used to, as far as like, I've always said, like in business, things that you measure get change. Things that you measure get improved. And so it's just helpful as a thought process to say, are we on the right track? Are we doing the things that we think God will be pleasing rather to God? Are we building relational depth? Are we checking in and gaining godly discernment? Are we helping protect our children and our families and our wives against the world? So it's not, I just want to double down on, it's not a, are we winning against other dads? It is, nor is it about, some sort of internal drive, like I'm racking up all of these points because I want more points. It's the root of it is why we're doing this. Is that making sense?
Oh yeah. I think of like even the point system, like I use this credit card where I build up frequent flyer points, right? And about every 2 years, I have enough points to get 7 or 8 free plane tickets. And so my family and I have gone on a couple trips where the plane at least part is free, so to speak. And I think about redeeming those points. And so that's where it all kind of breaks down a little bit, right? There's not some like machine you can take these fatherhood points and put it into and go redeem them. However, what does happen, right, is if we are focused on being faithful, focused on making spiritual investments, it's more like sowing and reaping, right, which is more biblical principle than scoring points. And it's the sense that we're trying to sow into our family the seed of the fruit that we want later, right? So I remember hearing a guy say one time, there's 3 laws to sowing and reaping, right? 1, you get what you sow. 2nd, you get it later than you sowed it. 3rd, you get more than you sowed. And those are the 3 basic laws of sowing and reaping. And he would say, if you want watermelons, you don't plant orange tree seeds. Obviously, if I want watermelons, I got to plant watermelon seeds. And so for us, where the point thing really breaks down is most dads, Lawson, I think, most men, I think, they go where they know how to keep score, right? So for example,
well said. That's what I'm talking about.
The danger in the family context is some of the most important things you're going to do as a dad cannot be measured. Like there's no cup, there's no yardstick, there's no tape measure, or you can go, oh golly, that apology was 4 feet long. No, that apology was probably 4 decades long, man. Like you might have made an impact by apologizing for being a jerk to your kids. You may have made a multi-decade impact and have no idea. Honestly, this side of heaven, you may have no idea that you did it. And what happens to so many men, we go where the points are obvious. And that's like work, right? I'm going to work, I'm going to get a raise. Man, I used to make 60 grand, now I make 65 grand. Look, I can see the score. I know I closed that deal. I know I got that. We'll go to illicit things, gamble, where you're throwing your money down the drain, or right. how many drinks can you have before you can't drive home? Like we keep track of things that we can keep track of. Right. And then we go to those. And so for the dad, I want to encourage him. Probably the whole point of this metaphorical exploration with points is to get you to this point in the episode and say this. You might be drifting to the place where you can keep score the easiest. And that may or may not be the place of greatest spiritual ROI for your family.
Wow, dude.
And I just know this from personal experience, man. You're going back to you're working extra long hours because you can see the result. You put in those extra 20 hours, you did get the promotion, or you did get that bonus, or you do get that time and a half. So you put those hours in because you can pull the result out of the vending machine. What's the result you pull out of the vending machine when you pray for your child? It's not often immediate. Sometimes you don't even feel it. You may not see it, but man, they may tell that story in 10 or 20 years to their own kids. Man, one time when I was really down, my dad Lawson, he prayed for me. It meant a lot. And I'm going to pray for you now. And some of these seeds that we're planting, we're kidding about the points. These seeds that we're planting are things that are more valuable and have a higher ROI than many other ways we like to keep score. So
well said.
That was Lawson and I talked about that last week, and we really wanted to share that idea with you. And we figured a good 30, 40 minute lead in would put you right where we needed you. So that's what we wanted to do in today's show. Dad, Don't just go where the points are obvious. Go where the spiritual return on the points is the highest. And that's going to be love God, love your wife, love your kids, pray for them, serve them, spend time with other godly dads. Do those things that you know are investing in your family, and you will like the return that you get. Join us next week for another episode where we trick you the first 30 minutes just to pounce on you the last 4. We look forward to hanging out with you next week. Lawson, thanks for today, buddy.
Take care.
Hey, Dad, thank you for listening to today's show. If you found this episode helpful, remember, you can get all the content and show notes at manhoodjourney.org/podcast. And if you really liked it, please consider doing 3 things. Number 1, share this podcast with someone. You can hit the share button in your app, wherever you listen to podcasts, or just call the person up and tell them to listen in. Number 2, subscribe to this podcast so you get episodes automatically. That helps us as well to help dads find the show. You can do that through your favorite listening app, whatever that is. And finally, review this podcast. Leave us a review, good or bad, wherever you listen. Those reviews also help other dads find the show. You can always learn more about what we're up to at manhoodjourney.org or fatheronpurpose.org. We will see you next week.